Attention, please. Would members of the Community Development and Recreation Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum? Thank you. Attention, please. Would members of the Community Development and Recreation Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum? Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Let's bring this meeting to order. Nice to see the TTC chair here. I guess there were delays on the TTC this morning. Welcome to Meeting 14, the Community Development and Recreation Committee. Special welcome to members of the committee who who are here and the other members of council in attendance today. We have some guests and, of course, members of the public. For those in the room with us, the screen at the back of the room provide real-time updates concerning where we're at in the agenda, what's coming up next. I hope everybody is having a nice summer. There's only 48 hours to go before the fall equinox, which is on September 22nd at 10:21 a.m. if anyone is interested. Yes, no, that's very important information that we're imparting today. So we have a fairly full agenda, and I have some motions here and some new items, but why don't we look for declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Any members? No? Motion to confirm the minutes of June the 23rd, 2016. Councillor Mihevc. All those in favor? Carried. So we have the agenda before us. If we want to go through that, please let me know if you'd like to hold any items for discussion. 14.1, tennis permit pilot project locations.
Move approval.
It's been moved by Councillor Mihevc. Does anyone want to hold that, or can we move it now? Just try it in when committee members were very focused here. It's moved by Councillor Mihevc. All those in favor? Carried. 14.2, long-term care homes and services, environmental scan and update. The council approved advocacy recommendations.
I'll hold for some quick questions.
Councillor Mihevc is holding that item. 14.3, provision of religiously appropriate meals in long-term care homes.
Move approval.
I'll hold that. 14.4, planning for Ontario Early Years Child and Family Centers in Toronto.
We have depths.
Well, that's held, yeah, we have a speakers list, and it's being held by Councillor Burnside. Yes. Toronto Fire Services and Centennial College, cost recovery for the provision of training services and resources.
Move approval.
It's been moved by Councillor Mihevc. All those in favor? It's carried. Modernizing the relationship with Toronto community-based nonprofit voluntary sector.
Sept.
We do have DEPS, so we'll hold that item.
Mr. Chair, is there a presentation on that?
It would be up to Mr. Brillinger. There is no presentation plan, but a very thoughtful and comprehensive report, I must say. 14.7, Community Investment Funding Programs, 2016 allocation recommendations.
Move approval.
It's being held by Councillor Burnside. 14.8, Community Legacy Grant, update on community meeting.
Move approval.
It's Councillor Mihevc. Did you say move approval? Move approval. All those in favor? Item 8.
Hold for depths.
14.9, it's hold for depths. It must be Groundhog Day, 731 Renamede Road. I feel like I live there at times. Well, at times it's coming back to us. 14.10, Survivors of Domestic Violence Portable Housing Benefit Pilot. We do have speakers, so we'll hold that item. Item 11, 2017-2018 Community Grants to Address Homelessness.
Move approval.
Moved by Councillor Mihevc.
Number 11.
Number 11. Anyone want to hold that item? You good? Okay, it's moved by Councillor Mihevc. All those in favor? It's carried. Item 12, Shelter Support Housing Administration Strategy to identify new and replacement shelter services in all parts of Toronto. We do have a motion here. We better hold that item. Okay. And item 13, Vision Assessment for Children in Toronto. I'll hold that. You're going to hold that? I have a motion.
Go ahead.
Okay, that's great. Holding that. So we have two new items that have been circulated. One is Councillor Mahevik, update on the settlement with Christie Gardens. A motion to introduce. Councillor Mahevik, all those in favor? It's carried. That's now added to the agenda. And Councillor Davis has also brought a new item to us. I believe this has been circulated as well. Committee members have had a chance to look at it. Need a motion to put it added to the agenda? I will do so if no one's willing. Councillor Mahevik, that's fine. All those in favor? It's carried. It's added to the agenda.
Mr. Chair, number 10, sorry, the one with Christie Gardens, it's a report request to go directly to council, basically. So if it's nothing fancy schmancy, so if you'd be so kind, we could move that now.
Do you want to move it right now?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. Does anyone want to hold Councillor Mahevik's item, or can we move it right now? Let's go to council
Go to council without recommendation.
without recommendations.
And
All those in favor? It's carried.
Thank you. I don't know if Councillor Davis is also a report request, I see.
Unless there are any objections, we can move the item now. Councillor Davis, did you want to speak to it, or can we just move it? Okay, why don't we move it? Councillor Mahevik, all those in favor? Carried.
Motion to adjourn?
You're pushing it.
No, we're not quite there. So the first item is 14.2. Councillor Mahevik, you have held 14.2. Questions for staff?
So, my question to staff, really, in reading the report, and sorry, I read it a few days ago, I didn't think it'd come up this quick, was at the end of the day, we are not advocating, we are not developing a position of advocacy to the province, given the, call it the demographic bulge that is coming up, and I confess some self-interest in this, to expand the long-term care and homes, long-term care homes and services to the province. At the end of the day, we as a city are maintaining, the position of the department is that we should be maintaining almost a status quo position.
Councillor, through the chair, the province and also the local health integration networks are currently engaged in a capacity assessment just on that very question. So at this point, even putting forward a request or a motion for the province to consider would have to wait on this information that they are working through. And I am also sitting on one of those capacity committees, in fact, as a co-chair, working through that information. So once that is available, I could bring back a report with information for this committee and council to consider.
Just for fun, let's for the moment assume that they will be looking to expand, that their analysis will determine that that there is a bulge coming and that we need to address the bulge. Will you be bringing back a report saying that we should be part of that process to say, okay, we can perhaps as a city look at increasing our capacity? Not that we have to, I'm not saying we have to decide today. I'm just wondering how this is going to kind of roll out.
Again, through the chair, it would be very speculative of me at this point to indicate one way or the other. Obviously, the city has a great interest and a concern, not only for the aging population, which we can see on the horizon, but also, as the report indicates, currently within the city of Toronto, 60% of the long-term care homes that both city-operated, private, not-for-profit, require redevelopment, which equates to 74% of all the long-term care beds. And as operators are considering redevelopment, because land is not something that is funded by the province, there are operators who are considering relocating. And I think that's even more of a growing concern for the city. So definitely there are considerations that this council will need to be examining as far as changes through redevelopment and also through possible expansion.
So you're going to report back, or you don't need a motion to that effect, do you? Or do you?
No, I don't need a motion because once that information is available, it would be my obligation to bring that information forward.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm good. Thank you. I'm pleased to move at the appropriate.
Councillor Davis, questions for staff?
So I didn't hear the beginning, I'm sorry, Reg, but the transfer of responsibilities from CCACs to LHINs is identified in here. Do we know more about when and how that is happening, and whether or not there's going to be an opportunity to align better Toronto with fewer than 5 LHINs?
With regards to the timing for the CCACs to be incorporated into the LHINs, my understanding is that the ministry is looking at a fairly aggressive time frame and are already doing preparatory work for that, with it anticipated early in 2017. But again, there's been no firm communications on that. With respect to the city being allowed to work with only one LHIN, regardless of how many LHINs may continue to exist after the final decisions have been made by the province, we are still hopeful. There was that report adopted by council, I think it was early this year or late last year, around working with one LHIN. We have not received any information, so we're still hopeful that that will take place.
And it's supposed to be beginning in 2017?
My understanding, again through the chair, is that the province's anticipated timeline is in the early part of 2017 to begin implementing the Patients First initiatives.
And just finally, so the report also, I think it's AMO or provincial organizations, identify that there will be a doubling of the demand in the next, I can't remember. Could you tell me what that statistic was again?
I believe,
Hold on.
sorry, I'm just looking for it in the report.
Oh, I see. By 2036, AMO estimates a need for it's more than double the current beds. Can we assume then that that would apply to Toronto as well?
Well, okay, that is, again, difficult for me to answer because this was AMO doing some research and the province is doing their own due diligence at the same time, almost parallel, although they are collaborating. The local health integration networks are also doing capacity planning. I can tell you, too, that the emphasis has been on aging in place, keeping people living in their own homes for as long as possible. But yes, I totally agree. We already see growing waiting lists because long-term care is being used to support individuals even broader than what the current legislation has specified. So definitely within Toronto, because our aging population, quite frankly, is moving at a more rapid rate than even within the GTA or Ontario as a whole. So yes, the need, I believe, will be greater, but I don't have my own stats.
We haven't done our own needs assessment, then. That's not our role to be doing that planning, or?
Not specific to long-term care. That we have to do in collaboration with LHINs and with the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. But definitely the city has done a great deal of work through Chris Brillinger and Social Development, Finance and Administration, looking at the demographics, our senior strategy, looking at what needs to take place for the city as a whole. Long-term care is simply a component of that planning.
But we do home care as well. We have a home care program, and I think we need to be looking at that, do we not, as well? The nursing program and...
Through the chair, absolutely correct. We are doing that due diligence, and that was part of the demographic work that we looked at when we prepared our service plan that was presented late last year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Ballo?
Yes. On your report, you talk a lot about diversification and demographics. So there's a need for our city-operated homes to serve those communities. But how are the LHINs and how is the province ensuring that this is being addressed? Are they working? Because I thought they were trying to move away from that, from have ethnic specific long-term care homes. Do you know anything about that?
There are no designated ethnic homes in the province because the expectation is, as far as long-term care placement is concerned, that people should be eligible to go anywhere. Having said that, because there are groups of individuals that are clustered, we do our level best within the city's long-term care homes to meet those cultural needs or individuals that have similar backgrounds and have similar needs and wishes to accommodate that. But while it is outlined in general terms within the Long-Term Care Homes Act, there's not a whole lot of specifics because, again, you can't have just a home that restricts admissions to only one cultural group.
Of course, of course. And we know that organizations such as Villa Colombo and so on, they serve and they have lists that they have to adhere to, but they have certain services that they provide, and they actually fundraise from a group of communities. You know, there's actually very strong community ties, different community ties in the Chinese and the Italian and so on that actually fundraise and actually do amazing work towards long-term care homes. So is that still happening? Is that work still happening in our city? Because I see the need being greater and greater, and you need these strong relationships with these communities to serve these residents. Is that still happening?
Through the chair, absolutely 100% agree with you, and 100% we are continuing to maintain those relationships and have been developing more and more alliances, partnerships with community groups. And I would say that it would be very, very difficult to meet the needs of all of our residents without those connections to the community. So we are extremely grateful for the support that we get from community groups, families, and agencies that are out there that we are working in partnership with.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Bello. Any other questions for staff? Speakers? Well, we can just move the item. It's before us for receipt. Councillor Cole? All those in favor? Carried. 14.3, provision of religiously appropriate meals in long-term care homes. I held the item. But before I ask my questions of staff, are there any other members of committee or visitors that would like to ask questions of staff? No? I'd just like to, then I'll proceed. And I have a motion as well, which I'll move when we get to speakers list. But as I understand this report, although we're under legislative mandate currently, what we're doing is we're accommodating on a case-by-case basis and still asking the province to step up to the plate to provide the appropriate funding to meet our legislative requirements.
Yes, Councillor, that is correct.
So we have a situation currently in which the province is asking us to do something under legislation which is not funded by the province, which meals normally are funded by the province. Is that how a short way of summarizing the paradox?
To a degree, what the ministry's compliance inspectors look at is meeting compliance with the Long-Term Care Homes Act. Where we have in the past received orders from the ministry is around the provision of kosher meals, and we have been meeting, in our view, the legislative requirements. However, the one thing that we had not done was, because we have not homes with kosher kitchens, so we have no ability to prepare in-house. So we have, since that time, contracted with a supplier to bring in kosher meals when those meals are required for religious observation.
Right. So in the various ethnic groups, we're accommodating on a case-by-case basis.
As far as cultural meals, yes, we are meeting those requirements within our standardized menu and accommodating that. And our standardized menu offers numerous cultural meals as part of our standard menu, and we offer always 2 choices. So yes, we are meeting that, and we've never had any orders with respect to cultural, only with regards to
Religious.
the provision of kosher.
Religious. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions for staff? No? Speakers? I will then speak. I have a motion. So we're trying to put a timeline on the request before us. And we're also looking for copies of the correspondence. Often we ask our federal and provincial counterparts to do something, and we never see the letter that was written. So we'd like copies. City Council members of council would like copies of that letter, and then we want to take the item as a package with the amendment. Unless there's any questions. Yep. Councillor Baldo's moving it. That's the amendment with the item before us. All those in favor? It's carried. And thanks once again to staff for preparing that very comprehensive report. Item 4, planning for Ontario Early Years Child and Family Centres in Toronto. Councillor Burnside has held the item. And we have a deputant. We just finished 14.3. We're very efficient here. Is Kathy Wright here? Great. Thank you very much for coming. If you could take a seat, you have 5 minutes to depute.
Mr. Chair, there's also you can sit with Kathy, too. Okay.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on this item. I'm aware of the reorganization process for Ontario Early Years Child and Family Centres. I'm involved in the process, in the consultation process by Children's Services staff, and when that process is complete, I know it will be great for families and children living in the City of Toronto. East End Children's Centre right now finds itself in an impossible situation. We're operating 2 child and family programs in the East Danforth neighborhood. And we work with the whole family, giving parenting support. Our programs are free. Child development and school readiness programming, early ID and referrals, all that's happening.
Really?
According to the Globe and Mail, the number of children under the age of 4 grew by 49% between 2008 and 2011. 49%. In 2009-2010, our programs were bursting at the seams, and we worried about safety and quality of programming. And in 2011, we started turning children away. Since then, we're turning more and more children away every year. And formal childcare isn't available for most of these children. Home-based, unlicensed care is a booming business in East Danforth. Whatever you may think of unlicensed childcare, our federal and provincial governments have not provided space for these children, so local home-based caregivers are doing what our governments are not doing, and they're providing care for children who can't access the formal system. And in East Danforth, that's how things get done. Most of these children are coming to us in groups of 5. So visualize strollers that have 5 seats each, all coming along Danforth to East End Children's Centre. And there are many of them. They're not just 1 or 2. And we can't keep up. We don't have the funds. We fundraise, but it's not enough. And every day we turn children away. And I'm sure you can understand the devastation of that experience for children when they leave their homes in the morning hoping to come and play, and they find themselves repeatedly outside a locked door. But there's a bigger problem that we need you to understand. And beyond that disappointment, the crying and the tantrums every morning, not just by children, but by parents too, sometimes there's a larger impact. Turning families away undermines every principle on which family support is based, and it undermines our relationships with those families. It means families who are in crisis, families who are isolated, mother-child dyads living with postpartum adjustment issues, newcomers trying to get connected to services, children who exhibit distressed behavior, and think here of children often on the autism spectrum who are not yet ID'd, and don't feel welcome anywhere else, and they're finding themselves outside a locked door. Parents who can't bring their children into play are blaming the caregivers who are bringing 5 children each. And I think we all understand that it wouldn't be a good thing for those unlicensed caregivers to try to do their job without our support. We're not closing our doors to them. Our organization's highest priority right now is to stop turning children away. And we made a promise to the community that we would try to do that by next year, and we're still trying. The reorganization of services that will eventually become the Ontario Early Years Child and Family Centres. I know the timing for the city and for children's services isn't good, but these are babies and toddlers. They can't wait for the needs assessment for the whole city. We've done the needs assessment related to the proposed program expansion, and we need to stop turning them away. We currently serve over 1,000 children a year. Our annual budget is only about $250,000 a year, because we're good with money. Expanding both of our program sites to 5 days a week would cost about $58,000 next year. And And the impact for the children of East Danforth would be huge. It's only $58,000, and in the bigger picture, it's not a lot of money. It's a lot to us, actually. But given what it would achieve, I understand that the budget
You could,
process
we're a
is-
little over 5 minutes if you
Okay,
could wrap
I'm
up.
gonna
Thank
wrap
you
it
very
up.
much.
Okay. Okay. I have a binder here with signatures on a petition and letters of support. Is there someone who can receive
Sure,
this?
if you want to give that to the clerk, we can have that circulated.
Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Any questions for the deputant? Councillor Davis?
I heard from parents that you changed your model at some point to have shifts so that there were parents and children that came first in the morning, and then mid-morning you sent
Kicked
everyone
them out,
away and
yeah.
then let all the others in. That obviously would have been a challenge. Did that work to solve your problems?
It allowed us to bring more children per day through the door, but what we gave them was a lot less. And I guess it was based on the idea that you can take something that's not enough and cut it in half and give it to more people and have it be enough, but it wasn't good.
It wasn't.
No, for babies and toddlers, you can't rush them. It defeats the purpose of having the program.
So you're saying that you've got space to expand, but no funding to expand?
Yes, we have 2 spaces, and 2 days a week. One of them is empty. 3 days a week, the other is empty. No programming going on. If we had staff, if we had money to pay our staff, we would be running both spaces 5 days a week.
Right.
And I believe we would not be turning any children away.
Okay. And okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Okay, we can go to questions to staff. It's a very substantive document in front of us with very significant implications for the city from a downloading point of view. Councillor Davis?
Okay, thank you. So I just want to focus first on the issues the deputants raised. And last June, this committee approved a motion that requested for you to work with East End Children's Centre and other centres in similar circumstances to examine service delivery funding options to accommodate the growing service demands within the Children's Services current and future budgets. And I don't think that took place, and I'm wondering if you can actually work with them to see if we can find some solutions.
It's difficult to find a solution for a single agency. While the
And
programming
others.
that was described is excellent, there are 300 sites across the city. We have a relationship with 34 of 62 contract agencies providing these services, and we must be able to take a systems-wide approach to determine where resources can be best allocated. The provincial guidelines call for us to try to make services equitably available across the city, and also to take into considerations those services that are heavily demanded, as this one is. But it's very difficult to resolve one issue without looking at the entire child and family system in its entirety.
Have you looked to see whether there are any other centres that are this oversubscribed, that they're lining up out the door half an hour before and fighting over who can get in, for whether there's any flexibility, working with them and any others in similar circumstances to see if there might be some solution? Would you be willing to look at that?
I would be
question
willing to
before
look
the
at-
overall system equity gets addressed?
I have anecdotal evidence that there are other centres in similar circumstances. As I mentioned earlier, I'm happy to talk to our consulting team that's out in the city to get a sense of what other programs and where they are located that are oversubscribed.
Of the 34 that we currently fund?
We can look at that. It
Not
is
the
impor-
entire Best Start system, but the 34.
All we can look at right now, Councillor, is the ones that we have a relationship with. The remainder, we do not have a relationship with at this point.
Right.
That being said, our budget for these programs is 100% allocated. So without looking at it in the context of the overall system, it's very difficult to reallocate resources.
So you can't do what council approved, which was to ask you to look at other centers in similar circumstances that are oversubscribed to the degree that this one is, to see if there are any solutions in the interim before the entire system is reorganized. You can't do that.
I have to look at it in the context of the entire system. That's been our regulated responsibility. But we would be doing that, Councillor, within the next 6 months. The
Well, I'll just-
process has already begun.
Well, I will find a source of $50,000 at some point, and I'm going to move that. In the meantime, on the overall system issue, there are four different types of early year centers. And the Government of Ontario is proposing that we're going to take full system responsibility. We're going to develop a service plan. We're going to ensure equity across the city. And we're going to manage the planning and implementation of this with no extra money. Is that what I've heard in this report?
To date, the province has announced that the data analyst services would come to the municipality. Those are the only additional resources that we've know of at this time. The funding model is not yet released. That's due in the new year. To date, the province has been resistant to adding additional resources to manage this. We and other municipalities have been pushing back aggressively, so they continue to consider the issue.
So we are already planning. I went online and I saw there's a branding for this. We're out, we've had 2 meetings. We're already implementing a planning process, and we're doing it with internal funding. How do we go after them and say, we desperately need money to actually implement this if we're already doing the planning we're asking funding for?
We've had 2 meetings, councillors, with executive directors of impacted organizations, and it's just been children's services staff. It's been important to have those meetings because the agencies are very nervous about what changes lie ahead. So we wanted to ensure them that we'd be working very closely with them to ensure that we develop a service plan that considers all of the issues and requirements. Going forward, as you see in your report, the intent is to use provincial dollars as best we can to start the planning process, but the legislation is clear in that we have to submit a service plan by the end of May. So it's important to start now. Much of the heavy lifting will begin in November, December.
So we have to develop a service plan for the end of April with...
Last question.
Could you tell us how much money we need from the province to do this?
I would say, in terms of doing the planning process, without actually moving agencies around or consolidating, I would say we need up to $500,000. In terms of managing the system going forward, we may need as much as $2 million.
Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge me, can we, through this process, identify the additional funding required to actually do a harmonization and equitable access plan?
I wouldn't be able to do that until we've actually done the service plan and understand the scope of transition that's required, but certainly after we've done that service planning work, we can put a number to it.
Because the report says we're going to find it internally through rationalization of services, and that says to me that they're asking us to do equity and harmonization across the city by redistribution of resources.
That was the province's initial position.
Right.
And we have pushed back to say that that is not practical. Once we do our service plan and can identify what is needed to ensure that services are equitably available, we would be able to put a number on it with what the dollars required to make that happen. And I think we can be clear in that service plan that without those resources, we would be unable to manage the change.
Thank you.
All right, no, thank you, Councillor Davis, for that and asking most of my questions. Any other committee members that would like to ask questions, visiting councillors? At the risk of being somewhat repetitive, I have a few questions for staff. The $219,000 that's immediately being allocated, this is for data analysts, and what will they be doing all day long? What is their function in bringing this in for a soft landing?
Data analyst coordinators are responsible for gathering, analyzing data, and using that data to facilitate service system planning across the city. Some of the data they use is generated provincially and federally. In this case, they'd be instrumental in conducting a needs assessment. The dollars have been transferred to, or will be as of January 1st, transferred to the city on a permanent basis. So they will be key players in our service planning, not only for child and family centres, but also for the early learning system in general.
Now, there's references in the documentation in your report that we may move some of the existing sites to less serviced areas. Now, how would you suggest that is done?
That's a very difficult task. That is the province's indication in their guidelines and in the regulations governing this. In order for that to happen, we would need to address in the service plan what adjustments would be required, and again, what resources would be required to make those adjustments possible. But absolutely, Councillor, that is probably the most difficult piece of this project.
Well, yes, you can bet that existing locations will be vigorously defended by local councillors,
Yes.
and those who are less serviced by them will vigorously advocate for new resources.
Absolutely.
It's a city hall, after all.
Yep.
The programs themselves, I mean, I consider this sort of a massive download, and that could take years to integrate into our current system. You currently don't have any existing relationship with about 60 third-party service providers. Is that
Yeah, it's actually about 34 that we don't have a relationship with.
And are you reaching out to them to?
Yes, in the 2 meetings that we've had to date, they have absolutely been included, and as we formalize the planning process, they will very definitely be included, both the agencies as well as the families that they serve.
Now, part of the challenge of the parenting and literacy centers, they're stationed in TDSB schools.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
That's correct. They're located in 3 school boards.
Yeah. And are we working with the school boards on?
Very closely.
Yeah, okay. Now, in both the Ontario Early Years Centers and the literacy centers, parents stay for those programs. Those are not traditional daycare.
No, none of
Sites.
these programs is childcare. Parents are involved, and in fact, in terms of numbers, there is about 61,000 parents are caregivers involved per year.
All right, so under these programs, parents stay. This is not.
They do
this
stay,
is
yes.
not- Okay. And if we don't receive the full 21 million, we'll be backstopping it with current resources?
If we don't receive the full 21 million, I will have to report back to council on how we address any shortfalls and deficiencies. I would be resistant to reducing our other services in order to backstop.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Any other questions for staff? No? Speakers? Councillor Davis?
First of all, I want to thank East End Children's Centre for coming again to identify a huge problem we have in the East End, which is an inadequacy of childcare, and as a result, we have parent-child drop-in centres, only a couple, that are so oversubscribed that they're virtually crying parents and children, or children and parents, every morning. They line up half an hour early outside the church doors to come into the parent-child drop-in centre. They have 2 sites, one at a church and one in a school. Both of those sites are only operating 2 mornings a week. And they have the capacity to expand to accommodate these hundreds of kids. I'm not convinced there are others like this. I think this is a very unique situation, and we could certainly be looking at trying to find some resolution to this before we sort out the entire system reorganization, which is going to take years. So I will have to find some other routes to see if we can address this. The space that they have staffed sits empty 3 mornings a week. The space is available, and there are hundreds of kids waiting. More than half, almost 60%, are caregivers. They are not parents, they are caregivers who bring multiple children. There are caregivers who are, and nannies who are parents who are nanny sharing. Parents who are struggling to find those alternative solutions to childcare because they are working. And it's landing on the doorsteps of the parent and family children's centers. And we have done, and the provincial government has frozen the funding, if you read this report, for 14 years. So the Ontario Early Years Centre was a Mike Harris initiative. They used federal money under the last national program. We, tongue-in-cheek, called it ABC program, Anything But Childcare. It was during the time when the Harris government put no dollars, in fact, cut 2,000 subsidies, ended up with cutting 2,000 subsidies in Toronto and cutting childcare. Instead, they created the Ontario Early Years Centres, and there's been no additional funding increases for those centres for 14 years. And they have absorbed the cost of living increases all of that time, and we have not increased as well the funding to accommodate any growth. I believe we've added some cost of living for the ones that we fund. And we are now being downloaded with the responsibility to take this disparate system plus the school-based ones. So the the school board has these very high-profile, highly regarded parent literacy centers which were expanded in the last few years. And now they're saying we will have the management responsibility for them. And it is going to be our job to take these 4 different kinds of centers and merge them into some kind of delivery system to harmonize, to get equitable access, and we're being asked to do it with no new money. And once again, you know, our staff have gone ahead and been very responsible in light of the regulations that they're going ahead with the planning with no new money. So I guess I'm tempted to say don't do it until we have the money. But I guess that wouldn't be very responsible. But when we get back what that money requirement is, I think we need to be tough with the provincial government at that time. These resource programs serve an incredible need, both for stay-at-home parents and for caregivers who need group play experiences for young children. And it's an important part of the early childhood system. Charles Pascal recommended, and I think you'll see the provincial government is expanding, to give municipalities the responsibility for all child and parent resource centers up to the age of 4, as well as service management responsibilities for 4 to 12.
Councillor Davis, if you could just wrap up.
So I'm glad this report is here, and I will continue to pursue some ability for some funding to be put in for those centers that desperately need it before we have the overall system solutions in place. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other speakers to this item? I will just make a couple of quick comments. Clearly, these are excellent programs. The Ontario Early Years Centre and the Parenting and Family Literacy Centres, I have visited both locations, both programs in my ward as a visitor, seen how they operated, met with the staff, met the parents and the students, and their excellent programs. We're not enhancing or taking on childcare in the traditional sense. Parents stay at these programs. And I think whenever we take on something that is provincially administered, we do so under a legislative mandate, but 5 years down the road, we say to ourselves, well, what do we get ourselves into? Not because there's any question of the value of the program, but the question of our ability to fund it and manage it properly. There are specific references within the documentation before you, which says that there could be a shortage of funds and that we'd have to backstop the taking on of these new responsibilities with existing resources, something we don't want to do. Also, in the name of equity, there's a suggestion here that we would move some of our current sites to areas of the city that are less serviced. Never an easy task when you've got local stakeholders and local councillors vigorously defending existing programs, and then those areas of the city less serviced vigorously advocating that they be placed there as well. I think this is a massive download that the city is not really able to manage at this time, taking on the responsibility of negotiating and dealing with about 60 agencies and dozens of different sites here, and a $21 million budget with no guarantee that we're going to get the full complement. So that being said, I guess we have to move to the next step with this and watch it very closely through the budgetary process. Advocate very vigorously with the province that if we're going to go down this road, that it has to be fully funded. The cupboard is bare at City Hall, and clearly if they want us to take on these programs and this legislative mandate, then it needs to be properly funded. Any other speakers? So there's recommendations on page 1 of the report for you. We can move them. Councillor Cole, all those in favor? It's carried. We have speakers for item 6, modernizing the relationship with Toronto's community-based nonprofit voluntary sector. Rob Horwath, Toronto Nonprofit Network. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and councillors, for this opportunity to speak with you today. So I'm deputing on behalf of an emerging organization in Toronto called the Toronto Nonprofit Network. And you have some information on this new network in the staff report as Appendix C at the back of it. And as noted in that appendix, the Toronto Nonprofit Network is focused on bringing together Toronto's diverse and extensive nonprofit, charitable, and grassroots community organizations from a wide range of sectors, including social service, arts and culture, health, education, and sports and recreation. So many of these areas of nonprofit activity in our city already have effective networks, as you know, because you work directly with them, for example, with childcare or housing service providers. This new Toronto Nonprofit Network is not something that supplants these existing networks, but instead it's modeled on an effective provincial initiative to create what we refer to as a network of networks. And at the provincial level, we've used this way of connecting our sector to establish the Ontario Nonprofit Network, which some of you may be familiar with. Similarly, the Toronto Nonprofit Network seeks to connect existing networks together and also to create an open space for community groups and organizations that may not be part of these other formal networks. One of the reasons we created this new container for connecting and taking action together is that we are interested in improving the general awareness of the scope and impact of the nonprofit sector in our city, not only as a mechanism for delivering public benefits in the form of programs and services, civic engagement, poverty reduction, and social inclusion, but also as a significant economic force in terms of job creation and contributing to our city's economy. We have some data on these sector scale parameters at a provincial level. For example, we know that in Ontario there are 4,600 community-based nonprofit organizations. This excludes hospitals and academic institutions, and these organizations employ almost 1 million Ontarians. We don't yet have figures related for Toronto alone, but if the size of the sector in Toronto was related to our distribution of population, with roughly 1/5 or 20% of Ontarians living in Toronto, then this would mean we actually have 9,200 community nonprofit organizations in our city, employing close to 200,000 people. To put this in perspective, this number of employees is equal to our city's technology sector, food and beverage sector, and pharmaceutical sectors combined, or it would be 3/4 the size of the financial service sector in our city. This is one important reason why we're deputing today and expressing our full support for the staff report in front of you, modernizing the relationship with Toronto's community-based nonprofit and voluntary sector, and its related recommendation to develop a whole-of-government policy direction and policy framework. This report does an excellent job of outlining the many ways in which the city relies on the nonprofit sector organizations to advance its policy objectives. The report notes there are a number of concurrent city processes underway that are aimed at updating city sector relationships. For example, the review of the city's community investment program funding, updating the below-market rent policy, and work to set up municipal management systems for the early years centers, which you just talked about. The suggestion that this report makes is that all of these processes should ideally sit within a broader policy framework that clearly articulates the objectives and benefits that the city and the sector seek in partnering together, and that outlines our shared commitments to advancing community well-being. And we agree with this objective, and we believe that it will help strengthen the capacity for our sector to plan more intentionally and collaboratively with the city in order to achieve greater impacts. Last spring, the Toronto Nonprofit Network held an initial meeting that over 100 sector leaders attended, where we worked together to shape the key principles that city staff have then used for the selection of sector representatives that are helping to advance what was then being called the city's State of the Sector Review. This effort so far has been collaborative and responsive to sector suggestions to widen the scope of the initial study, and the resulting staff report in front of you today frames what we feel is a very fruitful joint sector-city objective. In this regard, we also look forward to making sure that this policy work takes into consideration the diverse and essential contributions of grassroots and unincorporated community groups. As noted in the staff report, both formally incorporated organizations as well as residents' dynamic grassroots efforts contribute greatly to the social and economic fabric of our city, which I know all of you know intimately in your role as councillors. The Toronto Nonprofit Network is eager to support the policy development process that is proposed in this report, and will work with city staff to ensure that the impressive diversity of our sector is engaged in these discussions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the Deputy, Councillor Mihevc.
So at the end of the day, what are the deliverables that the not-for-profit sector is hoping out of this? Like, how is it going to make your world better?
Well, the hope is that it would create a framework so that when we are planning and working with the city in the very diverse numbers of ways that we do, whether it's childcare or housing or arts and culture, that some of the shared values and objectives are clarified and ways of working together are articulated so that we don't have to reinvent each time. For example, the planning work that needs to go on with the child center planning with the city. There are some shared objectives around equity, around process of policy development. How do you work with the city and the sector together to do policies in an effective way? And we feel like there's some really good processes that get created and committed to at the city in various divisions and departments, but it's never generalized into an overall kind of, this is good practice. This is a good way of planning together. This is why we're doing it. The other thing we hope to get out of it is to have an overarching statement that the council has committed to that acknowledges the important contribution of the sector as a sector in terms of employment and vibrancy, that and then underneath that, when other policies are developed, they will then refer to, well, what's the impact of this on our nonprofit sector in the city, being a huge driver. So an example would be the recent procurement policies that the city's developed. Just some intentional thinking would flow out of this more general policy to say, okay, how do we engage effectively with the for-profit sector to make this work? And what do we want to do in particular with the nonprofit sector? And what's its particular role in this policy? So that would be the hope, that it would, much like the city's poverty reduction strategy, that it would help connect a bunch of pieces that are already happening, but give some overall direction to create some consistency and better opportunities to work well together.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Mahavik. Any other questions for the deputants? No? Thank you very much for
Okay,
coming.
thanks very much.
Any questions for staff? Councillor Mahavik?
My issue, and I support this initiative. I think Rob Howarth gave a very good answer to like what's the payoff out of this, and putting it in a framework, noting its the economic impact, stating for us as a city, stating that we have all these partnerships all over the place in arts and culture, in childcare, in social service agencies. We have them all. And it's a way we do business. It's a way we promote the city's values. We don't think that it is appropriate to have us do all that work as a city. So we have these different relationships, some with the for-profit sector, a lot with the non-for-profit sector in key strategic areas. And for us to say that, to name that, and to say it, and to kind of bless it, I think is a good thing. One of the things that I'm hoping, and I'm wondering, I do have a motion to this effect. One of the things that I have felt for a long time, frankly, even before Megacity, is that we need to find a better way to deal with governance issues with the not-for-profit sector. Many a board suffers from all kinds of the chair that never leaves, reviews that aren't done, board people not knowing how to promote a board agenda with a not-for-profit. Is this part? And so I'm looking to, frankly, have a motion that part of your work look at that piece, board governance, and how we solidify board governance. Is that something that, well, at the end of the day, you would welcome? I'm not sure.
Through the speaker, through the chair, we have existing council direction to look at that issue, and in fact are doing it through the review of the community investment programs. So we are looking at ways we can more actively support capacity building on the governance side of the sector, but it would be there wouldn't be a problem if you were to move a motion that we also consider that in this initiative.
Okay, that's all, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, maybe there's a little confusion. I thought we had gone to speakers, and I'm surprised at the question, and that you didn't move your motion. So
I'll move the motion now if that's...
Okay. Well,
Whatever
just to reiterate, were there any other questions for staff? That was a preamble.
No, he asked for questions, and I made a question.
Yeah, I thought we'd gone to speakers.
You were doing it right, Joe. They weren't listening.
Okay.
So, speakers.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mahavik.
So I would just like to move this motion. I think this initiative is, frankly, is a good one. I hope it doesn't go so far up in the clouds that you can't kind of really make it real for everyone from arts and culture organizations to child care centers to social service agencies and so on. And I think, us as a city saying that the not-for-profit sector is a vital part of how we are as a city. I think that's a good thing for us to do. The ongoing issue, and I've raised it before, and I think it's worth raising again, is that is requesting staff to include in the program review a review for not-for-profits governance with a view to strengthening accountability, transparency, and sound management. At the end of the day, what these organizations, not-for-profits, also are factories of democracy, and and sometimes they don't act some of them don't act very democratically. And sometimes it's because they aren't given the tools and they aren't trained on how to be a board person, how sound board management happens. And so this is suggesting that that be part of the review, And perhaps I can see a community college or a few community colleges saying, we're going to develop some courses, some programs, some weekend seminars, whatever, and that we say as a city, you know what, if you want to sit on an agency that receives money from the city, you got to take that half-day course, because that's going to help you be a better board person. I think that would frankly help us up the game, up the game for frankly all our agency, not the boards, the not-for-profit boards that we deal with. So that's the purpose of this motion.
Okay, any other questions for the mover? Any other speakers on the item? Councillor Ballo.
I just want to very briefly thank staff. I thought this was a great report, great initiative, and thank you for all the work. I do support Councillor Mahavik's comments, but I'm looking forward to see the work coming out of this report. Thank you. It was great work.
Is everyone okay with just taking it as a package, the motion with the item? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item 7, Community Investment Funding Programs held by Councillor Burnside. Questions for staff?
Thank you very much. Okay. Through you to staff, would you agree that the sex industry and human trafficking are linked?
We understand from work with Toronto Police Service and community organizations involved that there are links between those things.
Okay. In terms of funding, I'll say in the space of human trafficking and I'll say the sex industry, I know Butterfly is one of the applicants that you've recommended approval. Are there other agencies working in that space?
There are other groups and entities working in that space.
Such as?
Maggie's would be a good example.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. It says I'm at 4 minutes.
Consider it corrected.
Thank you. Maggie's, okay. In terms of, you're talking about measuring outcomes. So when you talk about, when you refer to application number 2, Butterfly, what would the outcomes that you're measuring be?
One of the primary outcomes in that project will be increased knowledge on the part of sex workers about their rights and their opportunities.
And how do you measure that?
The agency, in working with their clients, would be assessing that and reporting to us.
So self-reported, okay. In terms of how do we, are you aware that Butterfly has actually spoken out against anti-human trafficking efforts?
I am aware of the complexity of the issues associated between sex workers' rights and anti-trafficking initiatives. There is complexity and nuance, and there are definitely conflicts on the perspectives of some. We're not attempting in any way to mediate that dialogue or that conflict, but to provide supports to sex workers who would not otherwise be able to access them.
Okay, fair enough, but what we're doing then is we have no, so I would infer from that, we have no way of ensuring that everyone's speaking or isn't working at cross purposes. So then essentially what we're doing potentially is funding agencies to work against each other. Is that correct?
Through other policy work, I've submitted a number of reports to council on the issues associated with trafficking, And we work with we have pulled many groups together to tables to have exactly that discussion and that conversation. That is an ongoing conversation and continues to be an active dialogue between the groups.
Okay, thank you. Is Butterfly incorporated in any way? Are they a not-for-profit, or are they just a group of people that have started this organization and put a name to it?
It is an unincorporated group with a trustee.
Okay. Well, who's the trustee that they will be working with? Because that apparently is a condition of funding.
They will have to secure an acceptable trustee to the city before any funds are released.
So they don't have one as of yet?
They are working on it, but it is a condition of funding. That is not unusual. We have placed that condition previously. Again, this is the tension between supporting grassroots new groups, but still ensuring that we have the proper oversight and accountability for public funds.
Okay, and then, so I know my time's getting near the end. In the report, there are a number of organizations that you've deemed worthy who actually have only been rejected because of lack of funding.
Through the chair,
correct?
I wouldn't, it's not a matter of staff deeming something worthy. We are measuring applicants against council-approved criteria.
So against council-approved criteria, there are a number of groups that will not receive funding as it is presented, just because of the lack of funding, but for no other reason.
That is correct. We have articulated very clearly in the report the number of projects that would have met the criteria and be deemed priority if funds were available.
So my last question, would you not think that when you have an organization that's potentially working at cross purposes to another organization that's unincorporated and that doesn't have a trustee as of yet, that it would not be better to find another organization to fund until all these other criteria were met?
The other factor that comes, those are all factors in the assessment, Councillor. You've correctly identified them. The other factor that would play in the assessment is the vulnerability of the target population. I'll give you another example. The council funded Lifeline Syria, which at the time was unincorporated, did not have a track record, but because of the vulnerability and the situation, the staff assessment was to recommend. Similarly, in this case, it is a particularly vulnerable population, and in order to try to address that need, and because the other elements of the proposal were strong, it is recommended.
The only thing that, from what you've told me, though, that the Syrian organization was missing is they didn't seem to be working at cross purposes to other organizations addressing a similar vulnerable group.
Agreed, and I believe this situation is one where there are different perspectives, all valid, all coming from a place of attempting to assist people who are vulnerable or experiencing some form of crime or marginalization, and it is a matter of working through those differences.
Councillor Davis.
You usually will provide for us, and I don't see it, it may be here, but the number which is how many programs were eligible and met priorities, but you've not provided funding for.
So through the chair, on page 4 of the report, there is a chart, and at the bottom of the chart,
Oh, I see.
it provides the dollar figure of the amount of funding, and the box above gives the number of projects that would have been recommended because of both meeting criteria and being priority, but we weren't able to recommend due to funding.
Now, in the past, when we've attempted to address this, have we ever asked you from this report to ask you to include in your budget for consideration in the next round of discussions, this amount of money?
I don't believe so, Councillor, but I would have to check.
Because I know that we've added money as a result of seeing what the unmet demand was. And this amount of, what is the amount, what is 2.6% reduction in your budget constitute for potentially for 2017?
The minus 2.6, I believe, is just under 400,000.
So if you're going to meet the mayor's target of 2.6% reduction, that's 400,000 on top, on each of these?
No, on the combined pot. The first reduction is the COLA increase. So that would have been submitted, that would not be going forward. Then a 2.6 reduction, which I believe is in the neighborhood of 380,000.
380,000, Councillor Mihevc, I believe you moved it about that automatic increase in cost of living? Is that what you're saying? What's the cost of living increase?
Just over 400,000.
Okay.
I'll have to confirm the number.
All right, so you're being asked to reduce 400,000 from the current level.
Well, we're not, it's not a reduction, that's simply not including the COLA in the base budget recommendation. Then a minus 2.6.
Right, so in total, what is that?
Again, Councillor, I'm sorry, I don't have those numbers in front of me.
Ballpark.
$750,000. So,
Okay, so $750,000 to meet the budget target, and then another $1 million is unmet needs. So
in this pot.
In this pot,
There
right.
are also projects that would, or programs that would meet all of the criteria, be deemed priority, but not be funding due to available funding under the partnership program.
I'm sorry, how much is that in the other programs? So it's
Of a
million?
similar magnitude, again, I don't have that number in front of me, Councillor.
Okay, so we're talking about at least maybe $2.5 million of reductions to meet the targets and the unmet needs.
Including unmet needs, yes, that would be the ballpark.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any other questions for staff? Speakers?
I'd like to speak.
Councillor Davis?
I mean, the only thing I would say, and that's obviously the theme of my questions, we're talking about building this relationship with the nonprofit sector and, you know, building a new approach to recognizing the nonprofit sector as service delivery agents for providing for the needs of our city in a range of services, and at the same time looking at reducing grants, absorbing inflation, and not allocating sufficiently to meet the needs that have been identified. And it worries me that once again, this will be a sector that will see reductions. And we know every one of the councillors around this table, and I noticed Councillor Burnside too, advocating for a particular organization. We know the importance of the services and programs that are provided by this sector. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thanks. We'll have to work this out through the budget.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Burnside, is your motion ready? Need a couple minutes. Any other speakers on this item? Councillor Bello, do you want to tell us about your summer? No? Why don't we just table it? Okay, we'll hold the item down. Item 9, update on proposal for emergency men's shelter at 731 Renemy Road. We have had a request to go in camera on that item. Is that correct, Councillor Nunziata?
You can go on camera.
Okay, so with the clerk's blessing, we will listen to the two deputants, and then we'll be going into camera to discuss some financial issues. Gabrielle Gillespie from the Community Liaison Committee. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Councillors Doucette and Nunziata, and a number of other dedicated city staff as a member of the Community Liaison Committee. The CLC staff report has endeavoured to include every idea and opinion brought forward at the meetings. However, precisely because of that, I fear it dilutes the importance of a few key points which were recognized as top priorities by the resounding majority of CLC members. Beyond the strain you are all aware will be put on health and support services already lacking in this particular neighbourhood, the oversight of certain basic resources in the current shelter design is of even greater concern. The CLC members believe these necessary resources speak to the most basic quality of life and across the globe are recognized as basic human rights. 5 key recommendations arose out of the CLC meetings which are currently not included in the current shelter design/plan. The first recommendation is in regards to wheelchair accessibility. While it is excellent that the entire building is single level, there is currently only one bedroom designed for wheelchair accessibility. The committee members agreed that additional accessible rooms are needed to respond to the needs of the aging and elderly homeless population, given that the majority of homeless men today are aged 55 or older. Secondly, there is a need for computer access, fast becoming a global human right. When the CLC visited the Fort York Men's Shelter, the 8 computers available were in constant use. The residents use these computers for job searches, communication with loved ones, and as a general information resource. Yet the SSHA currently has no plans to provide this basic human need for the residents. Local libraries may be able to fill part of the void the shelter's lack of computer access will create. However, given the promise of 24/7 operations, the CLC agreed that immediate on-site access should be provided. A computer room also provides a working space for employment workers, legal workers, and housing support workers to provide workshops, training, and support for shelter residents. A third basic human right currently overlooked within the shelter design is a quiet room where residents could go to relax, clear their minds, or read a book without being surrounded by constant noise and bustle. Not only does this promote mental health, the quiet room would also serve as a prayer room. We have learned that a large number of men in need of emergency shelter are new immigrants or refugees, many of whom hold their various faiths as their highest priority. Fourthly, many street-involved persons will not access shelter services even in the coldest of extreme weather alerts due to their refusal to abandon their beloved pets. It was determined at the CLC meetings that 2 to 3 pet-friendly rooms should be provided at the shelter, if not all shelters. This means space for human residents would need to be repurposed for canine companion crates, and the green space along Riding Avenue could be used for these dogs. The architect who designed the first working drafts of the proposed shelter did in fact inform us that pet use was considered when planning the green space. However, the proposed bedrooms planned for 100 men, drawn up by the same architect, do not currently allow any space for pet crates. Finally, there was also consensus that at least 2 single occupancy rooms needed to be provided for intake when a new client's mental and physical health needs are being assessed for the first time, as is the practice at the Fort York shelter, as well as providing isolated beds when a resident or 2 becomes extremely ill with a communicable disease. These 5 glaring omissions in the shelter design account for much of the reason the CLC is recommending fewer beds. Space must be set aside for wheelchair-accessible beds, a quiet prayer room, computer room, pet-friendly rooms, and at least 2 single-occupancy rooms, but by no means should the limited space currently allocated to the lounge, kitchen, and dining area be reduced. I would like to offer one final addendum regarding the lack of consensus on the appropriate number of beds, and I'm hoping you will note that a single person agreed with the proposed 100. Please note when the sole uninvested member is taken out of the equation, the highest number recommended was 80, with the median being 68. Thus, the current recommendation brought forth in the CLC staff report of starting at 50 beds, then gradually adding more, leaving the final number at a potential 100, does not reflect recommendations put forth by the resounding majority of CLC members. In closing, we believe the final number of beds to be a maximum of 80 beds will not only decrease strain on the surrounding community, but also to what am I saying? But also to, we believe that in closing, we believe the final number of beds needs to be a maximum of 80 beds, not only to decrease strain on the surrounding community, but also to reallocate the space currently apportioned for the maximum number of beds to be designated instead for wheelchair accessible beds, a quiet prayer room, that's my 5 minutes, a computer room, multiple pet-friendly rooms, and 2 single occupancy rooms, which would provide a higher yet still profoundly basic quality of life for the shelter residents.
Thank you, Gabriel. Questions for the deputy, Councillor Doucette?
Gabby, thank you for coming out today, and you timed it perfectly.
Sorry.
Well done. Take a breath. You're great. And thank you for also volunteering to be on the committee. I know we made you guys work really hard during the summer. We appreciate that. Just to confirm, it does say in the report that we did feel computer rooms and quiet rooms were identified as a priority. If the pet-friendly is missing, we will get it back in there. You talked a bit about the design of the building. Just want to confirm that you're aware that the architect we met with is not going to be the actual architect who will design the building.
Yes.
So the architect which eventually will be hired will put into their design what our committee worked so hard on. So you're aware that this report is part of what will go forward. I have to ask you questions, see, I'm not allowed to tell you things. So that all the things you've mentioned, computer room, quiet room, pet-friendly, different layout of the beds, no more than 10 beds, 4 beds per room, is still definitely going into this building.
Yes.
Good. Just as an add-on, you talked about faith. I have to ask this in a question. Are you aware that some of my faith groups have already approached me and would actually like to come forward and help us at the shelter and provide services?
Yes, and there are a number of people I know that would like to work with shelter residents in a number of various capacities, but the space that they would need to run those programs and training and workshops is not actually in the current plan that allocates the space for 100 beds. So it does have to be smaller just to provide basic services, if like not even considering the strain on the surrounding communities.
My last question. You were at the Fort York shelter when we did the tour. Did you find that helpful to let us understand what sort of spaces, what sort of rooms we should be putting into this shelter?
Definitely, and but then I was concerned that those spaces that we looked at as being necessities were not included in this particular shelter proposal. That's actually one of the main reasons I'm here today.
Perfect, but what we saw was a draft, not a final design.
Yes, which is good.
And you're
still have time.
You're going to stay involved with us all the way through, because we're not
Yes.
done yet, are we?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much. Trevor King? Thank you for coming, Trevor. You have 5 minutes.
Yep, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm here to share my experience about the shelter. I've been in a shelter for 4 months. Previous to that, like my issue was that I just found pleasure and joy in working. So sometimes in this society, people take advantage of that. So I didn't actually live on the street, but I lived 2 years in offices. And after my employer at that time also lost the office, I didn't know where to go. So I went to like City Hall and I asked, well, where do the like homeless go? Because I was definitely like burned out like several times, and I basically thought that this was it, because I actually didn't know of like shelters. I didn't know anyone who actually was in a shelter before. I didn't actually understand shelters, because I was always thinking, well, why don't they just work? But then for me, actually, there was this point in my life where I actually had to look for a shelter, because I just didn't have any other opportunity at that time. And then I was very surprised to actually realize that there's a huge social network that actually has a safe place for someone, because life sometimes has a lot of surprises, and I didn't know that there was this like social safety net before, so I was very surprised. I was 4 days at a Gerstein clinic, which is more like a emergency clinic, also like shelter-wise a little bit. But afterwards, I went to the Seton House, and I was there for like 4 months. First, I was very afraid to actually going there because, I just heard so many bad things about it, or it just felt bad, like people were thinking badly. But then I actually realized it was just the fear that I had in myself, which was reflected when I triggered when I saw others. So I dealt with that. I realized that the people in the shelter, we only see often just one picture of a person's story, but we don't actually know how it actually evolved, because I believe that no one is born as a bad person. Everyone is just trying hard in their own ways. And also with drugs, I've realized that most people are not actually addicted to drugs. They're more addicted to escaping their current reality or experience. And for me personally, shelters are definitely something very, very important. And it should really be emphasized. And there is a stigma, which shouldn't be the case, because the strength of a community is based on how they walk with those who are perceived weak. And unity in diversity by embracing it. I think that's the strength of community, and that's why I think it should be embraced. And we shouldn't let fear stop us. Everyone feels fear, but we shouldn't have it stop us, because else it grows. And there's just no way. So it's always good to go beyond the fears. And so I've been there 4 months, and I've been extremely grateful and surprised for that experience.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? Councillor Doucette?
Trevor, thank you for coming today. It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming to our meetings and speaking. We really appreciate that. So I just want to confirm, you were using a shelter for about 4 months?
Yes, yeah.
And what was your experience actually inside the shelter?
It was very professional. I was very surprised. For me, it was very, very, very helpful to have a counselor, because I didn't have any ID, and just a lot of things in my life that I didn't have, which made it really difficult for me to go back into society, because previously I've managed people. I've had that regular successful life, and then it's just sometimes but I'm very grateful that it actually exists, and there are a lot of very, very hardworking people there, which are usually never mentioned, and you never hear about them. And it was a very it was a heartfelt surprise.
So I just want to talk a little bit about the services you received in the shelter.
Yes.
Were you employed at that time when you were using the shelter?
Well, I was employed for 2 years prior, but I never got paid.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm not sure how.
So the services you received in the shelter, they helped you with employment?
Yes.
They helped you with
yes, with housing, with IDs, to get IDs,
Right,
and also
ID, yes.
with debt, because by then I did have some debt. So there was basically everything that I needed was there, and it was also because sometimes it's hard to get through all of the paperwork by oneself, and I had a lot of support there.
Thank you again for coming today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you.
So, going into private. There's no more deputants. Are there any other deputants to this item? Have you registered with the clerk? No? Would you like to speak? Okay. If you can introduce yourself, you have 5 minutes.
Hi, yes, my name is Viola Varga. Again, it's not the shelter that I am opposed to. It's the fact that there's a prison not too far away from it, and I've asked a number of times, maybe 4 or 5 times officially, that somewhere in the report there should be something about the prison, and I'm wondering if the confidential report has something to do with this. What will the effects be of the prison with this shelter population? That it's such an oversight that you have left this out. And I keep asking for it, and I wish that you would put this into your report. I think that you guys don't want to mention the fact that there's a prison at Kiel and Dundas because it's so bad. It looks bad on, it would look bad, and people would question what's going on here, right? But I think it's really necessary that this is not ignored, that how will this be the effect of the sheltermen with the prison population. This is a prison that is not a closed prison. It's a halfway house where the men are going to work, coming from work, and they're in the community, and we're part of this. I know this. I've lived here. I lived there in the area for 14 years, and before it was a very frightening situation because there was also drugs and prostitution, and the prison men were running the place because it was just a seedy area. And I'm just asking a very simple request, and I came here today again to hear if there's anything, if there's any, you guys are looking into this, or that you will just put it into your report. I'm asking that you're putting into your report the fact that there is this prison very close, and the fact that you have no policy with a halfway house. This is probably the only halfway house in Toronto. And you have no policy to put a shelter beside a prison, a halfway house. And you're doing this without even referring to it in your report. It is very worrisome. So all I'm asking is that you at least mention that there is a prison beside this shelter. But what you should really be doing, if you're going ahead with the shelter, is to see what interaction there are between these two groups. There should not be interaction because these prisoners are federal criminals who have been charged with federal crimes, very serious crimes, and there should not be interaction with the sheltermen. I don't know how many sheltermen will also have a prison record, and felons should not be having any contact. This is not permitted, and it will be very hard for the shelter to address this because the men who go to the shelter are not required to say anything about their past prison record. But I'm asking that at least put into your report that there is this prison there, and this has to be monitored because I live right in the crosshairs of this situation. I live where people come from the shelter, down Mariah and down Gilmore, and there was a woman on my street, St. John's Road, that was raped in broad daylight 2 years ago. I don't know who this person who raped her was, but we're not informed about it. And right in the crosshairs is a place, a sitting area. There's a park, and the prison men often go there and sit and interact with the community. And I don't want to see the shelter men sitting there interacting with the prison population. This should be monitored, and there's a Tim Hortons there as well. That you have not said that you would monitor that is worrisome. So this is all I'm asking.
All right.
I'm asking that you guys don't ignore the elephant in the room. It is wrong. It is wrong that you're doing that. It must be addressed.
All righty. Any questions for the deputant? No? Well, thank you very much for coming in. Are there any questions for staff that are of a public nature before we go into private? Councillor Doucette and then Councillor Nunziata.
Thank you very much. At the last meeting before summer break, well, not before summer, we don't get breaks, there were quite a few motions put forward. Could you very quickly bring everyone up to speed on where we are with each of those items? A little bit about the CLC, what we have worked on during the summer and where we are, so people will understand what we have done to date. I'm sorry, looking for papers quickly. Just give us a brief overlay so everyone here can see what we have been working on during the summer and where we are right now. And you can use my full 5 minutes if you need to.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the several motions that Council directed staff to undertake, we did establish a community liaison committee, and that committee met throughout the summer from August 10th to September 7th to come up with a recommendation on the appropriate number of beds as well as the recommendations on the shelter program. We're also asked to develop a coordinated service model for clients at the shelter program to better connect them to housing, income supports, and employment and training supports. We have had an offer from the Jane Alliance to provide employment programs in the shelter. As well, we have already connected with our staff from shelters, SSHA and our Toronto Employment and Social Services staff. We've already met and we're developing a more robust plan to support this item. We've been asked to convene a third party to work with the liaison committee, which we did. A facilitator did join the CLC. We were asked to develop a safe growth plan for the Rockcliffe-Smythe Junction area to address issues of safety and security in the neighborhood, to develop a community response plan, and to conduct a safety audit of the Runnymede Park, and also to improve visibility and appearance of the underpass and the train tracks near Runnymede Road. We did have a meeting. We've established a community safety committee. It also has its own email address where residents can email them. We had our first meeting with the residents. We identified priorities with respect to what council directed us, and in addition, members identified other areas of safety and security. We have met with staff in transportation, the public realm staff, to look at opportunities for grants for the mural in the underpass, and that looks good. Also, I understand that the councillor has also made contact with Hydro regarding the lighting under the underpass. So we are taking steps, and we are holding our next meeting in 3 weeks. We were also asked to make recommendations and develop a Rockcliffe-Smythe Junction strategy to improve economic development, access to city and social services, to improve neighborhood well-being. And what we've done in this regard, there is already a Rockcliffe-Smythe Neighborhood Action Partnership table, a local planning table, and we have approached that table to include a portion of the Upper Junction so that they would be developing a strategic plan together to identify services needed as well as what are the resources required for those services. And we have outreach to Toronto Public Library, the TTC. We are, October 4th, we're having a meeting with the Toronto Transit Commission to look at issues of transit, access to public transit in the area. We've also engaged with Public Health, the Director of Public Health in the area, and we're developing an engagement process. There was also a motion to direct the medical officer of health to include a community health officer in the Rockcliffe Smythe community to support the existing residents and as well as the shelters. There is a community health officer who has been assigned to the area, and she will be supporting the community as well as the shelter. Also, we were to meet with the Toronto Central Local Health Integration Network to explore opportunities for coordinated services. We did hold a meeting with about 10 agencies with the Toronto Central LIN, and we have agreed to meet on a regular basis to, again, develop a coordinated service approach and also identify any gaps in services. And again, there's a willingness to provide support, so we're positive there. We were also asked to establish a communication platform, such as a website, email services, where members of the public could get information regarding the Community Liaison Committee. We did establish a website right away. Minutes and all materials of the meetings were made public. They were also translated into Portuguese as directed by Council, and we've also established an email address for the committee. So that's my quick up-to-date.
Thank you very much. I think you covered probably 99.9%. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously very busy over there. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Nunziata.
Yes. First question is to Children's Services. I know that at the last meeting that we had, some of the deputants expressed their concern that in that area, which is my ward, Ward 11, the south end of my ward, that we lack daycare centers. So you've had one of your staff attend our meetings, so can you give us an update?
Yes, staff have been attending the meetings. They have confirmed that the shelter site is not sufficient to accommodate a childcare centre within it. So we have also liaised with real estate staff who did provide us with a list of properties that they were considering when trying to address housing concerns. Unfortunately, none of those properties were in the area. So at this point, we are waiting to see if there's partnership opportunities that may well come up in the ward. And the ward continues to be highlighted as an underserved area in our capital plan.
Okay, so would it be appropriate then today that I can move a motion on that you, to review the demand for a childcare facility in the south end of my ward and report back to community development, and when you get any
Yes, we'd be
updates?
happy to do that.
Okay. I guess we don't have anybody from Parks, right? So, okay, to staff. What have we taken any steps? I know that you've contacted the local agencies and but have you taken any steps to contact? As you know, on Riding Avenue, we have a George Bell Arena, and we also have a park that's used by hundreds of kids for soccer. It's permitted from the city. We notified the arena and Parks and Recreation on the intent of the shelter down the street?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have not contacted the George Bell Arena, but we have had discussions with our Parks, Forestry and Recreation staff, and we are establishing an interdivisional project management team, which brings all the city divisions to coordinate our service delivery so that we're not having to have individual meetings, but actually have a coordinated plan, and that is planned for the middle of this month. Sorry, I forget which month. September, thank you.
Okay, so my next question is to Real Estate Services. I'll ask more, the rest of my questions in camera, but just on the public recommendation that you, that's in the report, that Real Estate Services to secure the property at 731 Runnymede to release on terms that are reasonable at fair market value. And to continue to search for other appropriate sites for the new potential emergency shelter. So in your words, what is a reasonable and at fair market value? And what is the amount of the rent that Goodwill was paying before it went bankrupt?
I think that's an in-camera question.
In camera?
Yes.
Okay, so what is reasonable and a fair market value?
We would have comparables to look at in terms of establishing what we think market value is. So
Okay,
that's
I'll ask
what
the
we-
rest of my questions in camera, because those are the questions concerns I have. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. I'd like to hold this item down. Oh, any other questions for staff that are of a public nature? No? I'd like to hold this item down before we get to speakers. I know there's at least one motion. With the blessings of the committee, I'd like to go back to 14.7. Councillor Burnside's motion is ready. And we can put that, if we can put that on the screen, we can finish up that item. Any questions for the mover? No? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The item is amended. Favor? It's carried. Rather than go into in-camera session now, why don't we go to 1410, which has a deputant, Survivors of Domestic Violence, the Portable Housing Benefit Pilot. And if Sylvia Samsa, Executive Director of Women's Habitat of Etobicoke, is here. Great, thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you some of my personal my experiences and recommendation for the Housing Allowance Program for women who are fleeing violence. My name is Sylvia Sampson. I'm the Executive Director of Women's Habitat, an agency that serves women and their dependents who are fleeing violence. We are an active partner with the City on the Poverty Reduction File and participate on your Community Advisory Committee on Poverty Reduction to help bring a gender analysis to the strategy. As I spoke about yesterday in consultation with your housing staff, I managed a rent supplement program from 2008 to 2013 that sought to link women who were fleeing violence to private market housing by providing a subsidy over the course of the program. The following are the lessons that I have learned managing this program and recommendations that I am confident will enhance the outcomes of your very similar program. Women who are not eligible for the Special Priority Program, or SPP, need to have access to a housing allowance. The eligibility criteria for SPP program are so constrained that many women are not accepted. Not only does she have to live with her abuser to be eligible, she also has to prove that they resided together. This criteria are based on a very narrow definitions of domestic violence and don't consider that many women who don't live with their partner, and if they do frequently, are not listed on documents accepted as proof, such as the lease agreement. With private market rents being very high, women and their dependents not eligible for SPP experience homelessness and hidden homelessness, which includes staying in shelters with friends, family, in her car, or other precarious and dangerous situations. The rent supplement program I managed was available to women who had no other options, who were not on SPP. Women who are connected with the Violence Against Women Counseling Agency were referred to this program. In partnership with several agency representatives, we assessed women's eligibility for the program. The second point is that rent supplement programs needed to be delivered in partnership with VAW and women serving agencies. There's a very strong link between mental health, addictions, and gender-based violence. Rent supplement programs in the past in the States have shown that people with mental health and addiction issues who are housed in the private market often did not fare well. People need to be connected to social supports in their communities in order for such a program to work, especially during the transition phase, which was one of the key successes of the rent supplement program I managed. The Women Abuse Council wrote a letter of support for the city's application to administer this program, and it was signed by our networks that represent dozens of women and VAW agencies. In that letter, we offered to support and work in partnership with the city to ensure positive outcomes and successes for women who access this program. The third point, the program needs to assist women to plan for when the benefit ends. This current benefit program is slated to end March 31st, 2018. It is unclear what will happen when the benefit program ends. Will she be left to pay private market rent on her own? Will she remain on the wait list for social housing? Will she be put on a pathway to employment during this program? In the rent supplement program I managed, one of the criteria we assessed was what was women's potential to be able to pay full market rent independently when the program ended. We helped her connect with skills, upgrading, and employment programs, as well as child care and counseling services so that she was set up to be independent and successful. The 5-year rent supplement program allowed time for that to be accomplished. This program will need a review system that considers how likely a woman will be able to pay her rent post-program if she's not allowed to stay on the SPP list after she receives the benefit. The fourth and final point, this program will require an in-depth evaluation of program outcomes. We know from previous programs that some variations of rent supplement programs can succeed when the system is set up to ensure people receive holistic supports. As we know that in the past, rent supplement programs have isolated and failed individuals when these systems aren't in place. We have an opportunity to document and evaluate the implementation, strengths and weaknesses of this program and use it as a tool to work with the province to continue to refine rent subsidies and housing allowance programs that contribute to the spectrum of housing services available for those in need. Women's Habitat looks forward to working with the city on this project to ensure the best outcomes for the women and their dependents who are fleeing violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions for the deputies. Councillor Davis.
Thank you very much. So yours was a rent supplement program, not a rental allowance program?
There was also a housing allowance portion to that program. We had 2 programs.
Okay. And if I understand, you raised a couple of issues. One had to do with the criteria or the eligibility. And so do you have some kind of recommendations to us about that?
Yes, that it's not just limited to women who qualify for the special priority program. So there's a lot of women who might not be living with their abusive partner or can't. We have a lot of women who can't prove cohabitation, so they're not eligible for the program, but they're still they were in violent relationships.
You mean the special priority program, you must be cohabiting
Yes, you have to
with
prove
your violent partner?
Yes, you have to prove cohabitation to be on the SPP program. And there's a time limit of 3 months. So if you've been in the relationship and you left, let's say, in June of this year, you could still be eligible, but if you left in May, you would not be eligible.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know that. The other thing I wondered, so you're saying the VAW sector is fully supportive, and you're willing to work to provide additional supports? Is that
Absolutely. So the way the program worked before is we would meet on a weekly basis. We would review all the applications. There was a diverse group of sector providers, CCAS, CAS, our funder, MCSS was there, the city was there. We would review the applications to a very set criteria, and then all the applications that were approved would go to shelter and support, the housing department at the city. So we were very much in partnership in deciding who was the applicants, and I think it really was a very good system in terms of streamlining those applicants.
Okay. And you raised the question of the length of the program, and that obviously jumped out to me, 2-year program, what happens at the end. But you also said the previous program you were involved with, it still exists?
It was March 31st, 2008 to March 31st, 2013. It was
so
a 5-year
it's gone
program.
now?
Yes, yes.
And why was it not annualized into an ongoing program?
I don't have that answer. I don't know.
And what happened to the women at the end?
Some of them that were successful were able to pay market value, and other women who weren't have come back and had to try to get into rent guaranteed income program. Yeah, social housing, right? So what we tried really hard is we wanted to make the program a success. So we really looked at the criteria in terms of were women doing employment programs,
right.
Were women thinking of going back to school, so that to make sure that the program was successful.
And the thing you've said is that 5 years was a reasonable period to ensure that women achieved the greatest prospect of success, I guess, to reestablish their lives. Do you think that well, obviously you don't think 2 years is sufficient?
It's not, but I know in the sector we're very happy for this program because it does provide options for women who have been in shelters for a long time or are looking at different sort of areas of housing.
So one of the things I wonder about is the adequacy of the allocation of 500 a month. I mean, just this week, we saw in the Globe and Mail that or in some paper just the other day, that the cost of rental housing has now gone up 10% in the last 6 months or something, and 20% over the last couple of years, that if it's 500 a month, a single woman who's on social assistance gets $680 a month. That gives them $1,100 a month to live in a private market building, that the average rent exceeds that total amount. So are we setting up women for failure if we are only providing an additional 500 a month?
That's a very good question. I think what we see with a lot of our women at Women's Habitat, Layla's the manager of community programs, is a lot of women rely on food banks to sort of make do for that. I mean, you've all heard the story, women sort of look at cutting corners other places, and you're right. There are some places along the lakeshore that we've been able to house women for $800 a month for a one-bedroom, but those are far and few between, I find, these days. Yeah.
Right.
And if I may, when the subsidy does run out, then she may be, if she's left to pay private market rent on her own, she will be looking at moving out of her community, losing those community supports. If her child is in school or daycare, there's also impacts there as well. And from what I understand about the $500 a month, it doesn't matter the family size. If she has 3 children, she's still just getting $500 a month, but her unit demand will be, like her housing demands would be bigger and her rent would be even higher.
So this was an application process. We applied for this model.
That's right.
We've come up with that amount.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
I'll ask staff about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I thought there was a question over here. Councillor Mahavik?
Well, I was just trying to get clear on the asks, and one of the asks, I'm not sure what flexibility we have, how much of this is provincially driven, how much flexibility we have, so we'll ask at the appropriate time staff. One was the cohabitation issue, and the
other one is the SPP issue. If there's any way, if we can look at the model that we did years ago, which was a really, I think, a really effective model and was really a lovely partnerships with government and city and VAW sector agencies.
So you want a roundtable basically to help place women in need?
Yes.
AW women, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, the other 2 asks were an evaluation of looking at the process and the outcomes and how successful women are in the program, and I think there was another one?
And around that one, your suspicion is that 2 years is not long enough, right? Is that?
Yeah, and actually, this is going to roll out, from what I understand, we were at the community consultation yesterday where there was some VAW agency participants meeting with the staff, and from what I understand, it's going to roll out really quickly, and it's actually going to be less than 2 years because it ends March 2018, so it's a very short period of time to put in those supports, those ongoing supports.
Yeah, we would really like to work in collaboration and partnerships with the various players.
And what was the 4th issue?
I think that was it, the collaboration piece.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Councillor
very much.
Mahavik. Any other questions for the deputants? No? Thank you very much for
Thank you
coming
very
down.
much. I appreciate it.
Questions for staff? Councillor Mahavik? Councillor, flip a coin?
Comment on the issues that were raised by the deputants. The adequacy of the amount, the criteria for eligibility, and I guess the model for selecting participants, and the question of evaluation. Could you comment on those things?
Sure. So certainly, in terms of the amount, we did propose the $500 per month. We did an analysis based on the needs of SPP clients. We know it's not perfect. I can let you know our current housing allowance programs vary from, generally we use $250 per month and $400 per month for homeless persons. I would say that all of that is under review. The province is developing a portable housing benefit program that I think in the fairly near future, basically replace rent geared to income, and maybe a bit of a deeper subsidy in an amount that's more attuned to the actual market conditions. In terms of partnerships with the community agencies, we've, as part of developing the proposal for the province, we've started that discussion. Our experience and the success in the past is in working with the agencies, using their expertise to help identify the clients, make sure they have the supports in place, and that is our plan for this particular pilot. In terms of the length of time, unfortunately, our experience with provincially funded housing allowance programs is they're always time limited. And we're hoping that the new portable housing benefit will be a long-term, sort of permanent, annualized type of program. At least the bulk of the program would be that. We do have quite a bit of experience in working with clients to make sure that they don't get lost at the end of say a 3 to 5 year program. And we've had pretty good success in moving people into new programs. And for this particular client group, because they're the top priority on the current social housing wait list for rent geared to income, and they generally get rent geared to income within 10 months, all we're going to do is simply put their application on hold. And if it gets near the end of the 2 years, they will have the ability to access the rent geared to income program. Unfortunately, that may mean with the current program that they may have to move into a nonprofit building someplace else. My hope would be within that period of time, the province comes out with their new program and we've got a portable benefit and we can offer them maybe RGI where they're currently living. That being said, there's a lot of things in play currently in terms of the rules around these programs, and the province actually has a subcommittee working with the victims of abuse sector. We're at the table as well to talk about how to make these programs better going forward. So we would agree with the deputy. This is a good step forward. It's a good next step. There's a long way to go to make this what it really needs to be in the end, but it's a good step forward.
One other question, and that is, twice I think I've moved a motion to look at the question of the quality of housing that we're providing access to through portable subsidies in the private sector. And I've got some very good examples of buildings that people are using because they have so few choices, and they're in terrible, terrible condition. And we're putting people into really very poor quality housing. And I'm wondering if we are working on solutions for that have to do with the state of good repair, maintenance, outstanding work orders that from property standards, audits, and whether or not we can use, I hate to say it, but our financial clout through portable subsidies to force buildings to be repaired.
So I would say we are working closely with municipal licensing services. It's not often that we would have an entire building where we're funding housing allowances, but in many cases we do have a rent supplement program, for example, we're funding a significant amount. So we do work closely with them. We do follow up with the landlords where issues arise. That is something we need to look at in terms of a portable housing benefit program. We have to look at the condition, the question of quality of housing, and how we build in some controls and some.
And do you assess the quality of the building before you determine whether or not a rent supplement will go there? Or I know a housing allowance is portable, and those potential tenants decide which housing to select. But do we assess the quality of the housing before we put rent supplements in them?
So for rent supplements, yes, we definitely do. And we access all the information we have at the city with regard to those particular buildings. For housing allowances, we do not have that ability. And again, that's the challenge, is to find a way to support those tenants and to find a way to deal with those issues when they arise.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Councillor Mihevc?
Thank you. Just the rule around cohabitation, the 3-month rule, is that our piece or is that a provincial piece?
So that The rules around the special priority policy for social housing have been in place for quite some time. The provinces adjust them from time to time. There's a lot of controversy about, I would say in the past, in the sector in terms of what those specific rules are. It's a bit of a balancing act between do you open it up more broadly, which basically means that that particular client group gets a much larger proportion of RGI units. That is one of the concerns in the sector, that this group, this clientele almost needs its own program with adequate funding to support it, but it's a provincial rule.
So willy-nilly, we don't have, we have an ability to advocate to the province as it's setting other programs in place and policies in place. But on this one, it's 3 months, that's it.
Yes, they're very strict on this particular program.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mihevc. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Barlow?
I just want to confirm, is this part of the announcement that the feds had on the social infrastructure funds? No. So there was an article in the Star on Saturday talking about the province moving into a 20 million, and part of it was federal, part of it was provincial. Is this what this money is coming from?
No, it's not. It's a separate provincial-only program.
So they've just increased, and they're talking about a program for $20 million over the next 2 years, a pilot. Is this going to come on top of this one that we're just launching?
I would say there's quite a number of new federal provincial initiatives right now, and this would be on top of any of those programs. It's not.
Can you please report to us on the announcement that the province had recently had and how it relates to this pilot, and maybe we can scale up. If if there are two different programs, can we actually start looking into scaling up the one we're just launching?
Sure, we can look into that, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Any other questions for staff? I don't think there's any motions, but are there any speakers? Any speakers? No? Well, it looks like a strong program. We have the recommendations before us. Someone like to move them? Councillor Cole? All those in favor? It's carried. Go to item 12, Shelter Support and Housing Administration Strategy identifying new and replacement shelter services in all parts of Toronto. We do have visiting councillor's motion. Councillor McMahon, I don't know whether it's been circulated, it doesn't have to be, but you have questions for staff.
Well, I just wanted to confirm that 1A, I'm just wondering if 1A is redundant now with the, in light of the OMB decision that was uncovered and
Well, in other words, dusting off the old 12-year-old OMB decision regarding council's authority.
or if this stands, if this is fine.
Staff, embedded in this report back is a legal brief on the OMB decision and how it affects City of Toronto decisions. Don't see it as redundant, quite frankly. It's a separate.
Okay, fine. So if you, I think you, Chair Pasnick, you were going to take carriage of this and move it.
I'd be happy to take carriage of the motion. It is on the screen.
So just with the experience that I've had with my shelter.
We jumped to.
Oh, sorry, that was
speakers.
questions. Okay, thank you. That's
Yeah,
it.
there were questions for, are there questions for staff? Yes, we do have some. Councillor Doucette?
Thank you very much. Will other councillors be involved with helping you come up with new criteria of how we move forward when we're selecting shelters?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we are planning to do a focus group with councillors to get their input, and then as well, once a framework's been developed, is to get their input again. Will we also be doing any consultation with residents who have
had shelters proposed in their neighborhoods.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we are planning a series of focus groups, including with community liaison committees who have gone through the process.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Nunziata?
I don't know if this was asked earlier, but when you just mentioned that you would be consulting with the councillors, that would be before you choose the site?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're consulting with the councillors on the community information process or the engagement process, so that will be determined once we develop the framework. So we don't have an answer to that yet.
But that would be part of the framework.
Well, if
we don't want to make another mistake like we did with Runnymede.
Correct.
Councillor Mihevc?
Yes, thank you very much. I read the report, and I know you've put a bunch of additional reports from previous times, but I think the one that really is kind of important here is the supplementary report dated September 6th. That's the new bit, right? Okay, so I'm just wondering if you could kind of respond to this. In my read of it is you want to do a kind of a broad education piece on housing and homelessness and the need for shelters. Is that basically?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's two components.
Okay.
Part of it is coming up with a strategy on how we can do a general public relation messaging or communication to sort of dispel some of the myths that people have when they hear the term shelter. The second one is to review and I'm sorry, my voice is going, the actual community information process that we've been using over the past when we locate shelters. But those two sort of have to be integrated in a way, right? We have to ensure that we've got general messaging out there, and then when we're trying to pick a specific shelter location, that process just continues to build on that. So there's going to be two components to the
Okay, and
strategy.
where are you thinking the weight of that should be? I have an opinion on that. That's probably why I'm asking. I'm sure that's why I'm asking. I have an opinion on, of course, both are necessary, but bottom line here, everyone supports homeless shelters when they're in his ward, not my ward.
So,
sorry?
When
Literally.
you come down to actually picking a location, experience has told us that we have to focus a lot of attention on that. You can't just rely on general, broad communication, but it's still an important piece I think we have to get out there. And that's why I say the two have to be integrated and more leveraged. But when it comes down to actually picking a shelter location, we're going to have to put a lot of thought and emphasis and work in terms of bringing that community up to speed and working with them and getting them comfortable.
Right, so the weight of this will be on the latter, not the former. It's, it's some broad general messaging, okay, public education, we do that. Okay, I guess you got to do that. But really, this is about, Joe Mihevc is having a shelter in his ward. Then there's a team, a person, an outside consultant, an inside person saying, Joe, you don't have a choice over the shelter. You have some choices over how this gets worked out in your community, and we're going to give you a lot of support in making sure that the right meetings are held, the right information gets out there, and we're going to hire either an outside person, or it sounds like you want an outside person, or bring inside so that they're a part of our staff. It doesn't really, as long as that person has to have a lot of skills. Could you comment on that part?
We want to bring in a third-party facilitator to help us when we engage the community and the different sectors on reviewing the whole process. Whether we then on actually implementing that revised and improved information process when we're actually picking a shelter, whether we use a third party or internal, is something that we still have to assess. It'll probably be, in all things, a combination, but that's part of our review process, and Rob might want to add to that.
Right. Okay, great. Okay, I'm content. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Davis?
I'm just reading the supplementary report, and I did not know there was even something called a CIP. And I did not know we were supposed to have a community liaison committee for our shelters. So you're going to take this CIP policy that was approved in 2003 and revise it, is that
We're looking,
essentially?
so we've had experience using that process, and I think everyone will agree there's opportunities to improve it.
Okay.
And that's what we're going to aim
And
to
so
do.
councillors Fletcher and Bailau are having on October 3rd a charrette? Are we, that's what it says.
I think that, I'm going to refer that to staff. I think the date may have changed.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, yes, both councillors have offered to host the charrette, and we are working with them. We are revising the date so that we have more time to hire a facilitator to help with the charrette.
Okay, and the charrette is intended to discuss best practices, or?
Correct. Best practices, new ideas, and get input in terms of, you know, a good process.
Okay, so are the community, I think the policy in 2003 came out of the court case that arose from the shelter in Ward 31, I think, was it not? The Hayworth House, the residents took it all the way to wherever, I remember that, about whether or not the separation distances that were in the existing bylaw were legitimate. And now the separation distance issue is no longer a policy in the bylaw, is that correct?
I'm going to try and explain this as best I can, and we have legal here as well. My understanding of that, I'm not sure if it was related to a specific shelter, I'm not that sure. But the OMB decision relates only to the zoning component.
Yes.
It doesn't relate to council actually approving a program or a shelter location.
Right, so the zoning had separation distances in it, and I think that zoning has subsequently been changed. Are there separation distances now in our
I'm
zoning?
going to let legal respond to that.
It was 500 meters or something like that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of that specific decision. There's, the municipal shelter bylaw includes zoning requirements, as does the harmonized zoning bylaw. But
Does it include separation distances?
I think it's 250 meters.
Oh, and that's still in there? I thought the question of the separation distances was challenged by the court decision, but no.
This
The
just-
authority.
Okay,
We can report back for further clarity. There's an OMB decision, and there may be some site-specific court decisions as well, but I'm not aware of the specifics of those.
because I would really like to understand that in the context of if we're discussing locations and a process for locations.
We can include that as part of the report.
Okay. The other thing I wondered was the requirement for community liaison committee. Do we require a community liaison committee to be not just established at the beginning, but to be maintained as an ongoing operating structure?
So the way we create the CLC and the way we use the CLC has developed over time. It's not specified in the actual bylaw. Our practice has been to set up a CLC as soon as possible and to have it continue and operate and continue even after the shelter is opened for as long as necessary. And usually it's for a number of months after the shelter is open. So that's a practice. As
So there
opposed to
is
policy.
no ongoing community liaison structure required for a shelter? Because it seems to me we ought to be considering that as well, as problems arise on an ongoing basis.
I would say in some cases CLCs continue for quite some time. We have ongoing communication. We have lots of vehicles for communication with the community. It just may not be a CLC. CLC, that tends to be a very intense period, the initial discussion and then the initial operation of the shelter. And then we adapt accordingly, but we're always willing to keep the CLC going if it's necessary.
So I thought there were new requirements in the shelter standards about communications and community liaison and outreach to ensure good and ongoing working relationships with businesses and neighbors and organizations around a shelter. And that's part of the standards, they must maintain those. Because I don't think they do, frankly.
So that is part of our review. That's exactly why we want to do this review. We've developed practice for over a number of years. I would say some of what we do is not necessarily best practice, but we're looking at other jurisdictions. We're looking at experts in the community. We're even looking at other types of services where there's some controversy when services go in to talk about how the best practices in those other service areas.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any other questions for staff? Speakers? Councillor McMahon?
Well, I'll just, you've seen the motion, I think, and I will just ask for your support when Chair Pasternak moves that. We've all been, or most of us anyways, have had experience with shelters going in our wards recently. And it's not the best it could be, the whole process. And it's very misleading, I think, to the residents and confusing. So I think we need to get our semantics straight, our process straight. And I think since they are adopted always by council, that it basically should be delegated authority staff, and you'll see that in recently we've uncovered an OMB decision from 2004, which is listed in your supplementary report, and we'll get more information on that at council. But in that decision, it essentially took council out of the equation and basically allows for 1A is what I'm asking for. So I would encourage you to give that a read and stay tuned for council on that. But all that to say, love your support on this to make it easier.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
I think finding the balance between staff delegated authority and the political reality that we face is a difficult one, and I don't think councillors should be taken out of the picture. I think we need to have, in fact, a more refined and comprehensive approach to how we engage neighborhoods. And looking at this CIP, or whatever that was called, policy from 2003, it simply says staff will decide, and then there will be one information meeting. And that is not best practice. And I think that every neighborhood is different. You have different players and stakeholders. You have situations where there may be individuals or organizations that are motivated by for different reasons to whip up communities that can cause, worsen a situation. And I think that it needs a very nuanced approach that may not be one public meeting. And the people who know those communities best, or very well, maybe not best, but very well, are the local councillors. And they know the players on the ground. And I think there needs to be a framework that allows for a variety of options. And at the same time, though, recognize the right to put in and the desire to put in shelters all across the city and not just in those historic downtown wards. So I look forward to this report. This is probably one of the most challenging services to expand in neighborhoods, and I look forward to seeing what we develop for the future and for the next sites. And I thank you for this report, but I don't think it necessarily means delegating everything to staff to decide.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Mahevik?
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to move the staff recommendation, or it's actually received the report, so happy to move that, but whatever. I think the struggle that we're having as a city with new shelters is how do you have difficult conversations with communities? That's really what why this report is before us. I frankly don't think that doing public education on a broad level, that might have an impact, a 2% impact on the issue. The further away difficult conversations are, the more we're supportive of them. The closer they are to our families or our neighborhoods, the harder those conversations are. And it could be, and we've all experienced it, if not once, multiple times. And we know that sometimes it happens well, and you think, oh, why can't this happen everywhere? And sometimes it just descends down, and you just pull your hair trying to figure out how to bring this to a good place. All I know is that there's no way that you can have a difficult conversation with understanding conflict, the nature of neighborhood conflict, and willing to go through it. You can't go around it, you gotta go through it. And in our Toronto, there are skilled people, there are people out there who have some good skill sets around how to do this. There's some good people in the city that have skill sets around how to do this. And I marvel at community meetings that are difficult meetings around a whole host of issues, at how they move a community from A to B, and how they allow people to voice their feelings without getting caught up in their feelings, and how they can get from individual think to group think, which is what really we're trying to do with these with the shelters. So we need this, like we needed this long time ago, because if we had this long time ago, I think the process going forward, because we need another 10 shelters. We need that in place as soon as possible, so that those conversations that have to happen, can happen with some integrity. So this is good. What's before us is good. It's a little bit too much on the general education, in my humble opinion, and I just leave that out there as a comment. What we're looking for is that outside agency or that inside person who has the skills, who knows how to, who can help communities have difficult conversations. And when we find that agency or that person, I think we're going to keep them, grab them, hold on to them, and because they're going to be a vital asset to the next couple of years or 3 years when we have to put all these shelters in place.
Can we adopt these? Are we moving adoption? Thank you, Councillor Mahavik. Any other speakers on the item? I would just simply add to the previous. Oh, I'm taking carriage of Councillor McMahon's motion, which I believe was circulated not only with the agenda but also today. We can add that to the conversation. I would simply say that, add to some of the comments already made, that extremely complex and difficult public policy options can more likely be brought in for a soft landing if the process for community consultation is handled in a sympathetic but stern way. Certainly, full disclosure and transparency is vital, but also an end game where you bring it to a final conclusion. In Ward 10 now, there's debate over the Allen Road District Plan, which is a 55-acre vacant parcel of land controlled by Build Toronto. Not an easy piece to explain to the local community. To credit to Build Toronto, what they did was they brought in a third-party convener to meet with various neighborhood groups and associations and reach out to them, and then we had a wider meeting. And I'm not saying it's going perfectly, but it's going fairly smoothly. And certainly earlier in my political career, I was asked by the leadership of the TDSB to bring in the Afrocentric Alternative School into the ward I represented, because no other trustee would. And also a very controversial public policy issue, but we managed to reach out to key stakeholders, explain in detail what it was all about, what the long-term objectives were, and despite some of the divisiveness of the debate, the school ended up opening full with a waiting list, and many detractors later bought into the public policy initiative. So with that, I think the report before us is a good framework. It was sent back to us from, just as a reminder, it was sent back to us from City Council, urging adoption of not only the motion, but the recommendations, and we would send this back up to City Council again for consideration. So all those in favor of the motion? First of all, we can vote on Councillor McMahon's motion first, and then the whole package as amended. All those in favor? Carried. The package is amended? It's carried. The recommendations as amended. Okay. The final item before we go in camera is item 13, vision assessment for children in Toronto. Are there any questions for staff? No questions for staff? Any speakers? I have a motion, so I will speak, but I'll let members of committee or visiting councillors speak first. Well, since there's a stampede of speakers, I guess I will speak. If we can put the motion on the screen. Prior to this report coming back, I had been working on the poverty reduction strategy and doing an enormous amount of reading on various strategies in different jurisdictions, both here and in the United States, and looking at ways in which government can help with student achievement. And one of the public policy issues that kept coming up was vision care, and the shocking number of school-age children that did not have the proper corrective lenses or assessments to ensure that they could see everything that was going on at the front of the classroom. So I'm proud to say that Councillor Mihevc wrote excellent in red writing with 3 exclamation marks on this motion. I haven't seen that on a document of mine since I was in elementary school, although it's short of the happy faces. But this is something that we have to take very seriously, because there's thousands of young students, young children in our classrooms today that cannot see the board, and vision screening and testing is something that we must take very seriously. And I know the word mandatory makes people nervous. But we're simply asking for a report back to see how we might be able to put that at the same level as immunizations because of the importance of it. And there's irrefutable documentation that shows that educational achievement is linked to the ability to have full vision and corrective lenses if required. I realize that in some cases, there are financial barriers, and we have to ask staff to come back and see what kind of financial resources are required should a financial hardship become a barrier, primarily at the lens and glasses end of the process, not so much on the examination, as most are covered under OHIP. So with that, I would ask for a vote on the motion before you. All those in favor? It's carried. The item is amended. All those in favor? It's carried. So the last piece of business for today is going in camera at the request of Councillor Nunziata. I will read the motion to move us into in camera.
Sorry, could we,
Oh,
We just do a motion to finish this item before you go into camera?
yes, here we go. I do have a motion also to complete the agenda. This is the last item. Yes, well, yeah, that the Community Development Recreation Committee extend its meeting past the lunch recess to complete the agenda. All those in favor? I appreciate your enthusiasm, Councillor Giuseppe, but you don't have a vote here. But I know my committee colleagues can raise their arms and support that. So moved. Carried. And I'll just read a motion taking us into out of public session, recessing the public session, going in camera. Community Development and Recreation Committee recesses public session to meet in closed session to consider item 14.9 as it relates to the proposed or pending land acquisition by the city or one of its agencies, boards, and commissions. All those in favor? It's carried. So we can recess for 5 minutes for members of the public and the media to vacate the room, and senior staff to stay, and obviously committee members and visiting councilors to stay. Okay, welcome back to public session. We completed our in-camera portion of item 9. We can now go to speakers, or if there's any public questions that have not been asked, we'd be happy to go back to that. Councillor Doucette, questions for staff?
So just a very quick question. Again, going back to the motions we brought forward at the June CD&R meeting, we have a lot of items we were asking staff to look at. It's not just how do you renovate a building to put X number of beds in and what services will be provided into the building. We also heard from residents about the lack of services in the community. So just as an example, we are looking at audits of a park. We're looking at audits of the underpass. We're hoping to get other services in. Could you just give us some idea so residents don't think that this is a pie-in-the-sky idea, that we can actually move forward with the motions we did put forward in June, because there are some funds available? Can you just confirm that for me?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we were asked to identify what the services might be required, as well as the resources required to support those services. And there are a few sort of options that we have. Council approved the Partnership Opportunity Legacy Fund, which was a fund of $3 million per year over a 5-year period for neighborhood improvement areas to increase public assets in the community. Also, we have been in discussions with our transportation public realm staff that do have funding for murals and other activities in places that are kind of orphan or like underpasses. Also, through the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy, we have a funders table that includes foundations, the United Way, and other organizations where we talk about investments in neighborhood improvement areas, so we would bring those proposals to that table as well. And then council asked us to identify additional resources. We could bring that to council as part of the budget process. But in addition, through our interdivisional project management team, we would work with city divisions with respect to what could be done with current resources and what would require additional resources.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Any other questions for staff till we go to speakers? Okay. Speakers list? Councillor Nunziata?
Thank you, and thank you to the committee. I do have a motion that Councillor Mihevik has agreed to move for me. You can put it on the screen. Is City Council Director, General Manager, Children's Services, as part of the development of a York Weston Junction Community Strategy requested by City Council in July 2017 to review the demand for, I think that should be 2016. Shouldn't it? Yeah. Yes. I thought I missed a year here. To review the demand for a child care facility in the south end of Ward 11 and report to the Community Development and Recreation Committee on the results of the review. So I'm moving this motion because in July, if you recall, that when we had our public meetings, our 3 public meetings, and when deputants came to the committee to speak, one thing they did express that there was a lack of daycare in that part of the ward, in the south end of my ward, in that there was a much need of daycare. So we did speak to Children's Services, and they did attend our liaison committee meetings, and they will be looking at sites around in that area to provide the daycare that's necessary for the community. As it was mentioned, there was a liaison committee that we met every Wednesday for about 6 weeks, so I didn't have a vacation at all. I wanted to thank actually the committee members, my residents in Ward 11 and residents in Ward 13 that attended all the meetings. And we also took a tour of one of the shelters at one of our meetings. And one of the one of our speakers at our last meeting was the debutant that you heard this morning on the young man that was, that Trevor, that spent 4 months in a shelter. And there, there were a lot of issues and concerns that were brought up, and the report identifies the issues that came up and the lack of services in the area. So I'm hoping that we can get the funding that's needed to provide the services, because if we don't provide those services around the shelter, I think it would be, it just would be chaos, and it would not work. We can't just throw shelters in communities when there are no services, and not only the daycare services, transit services, so much that needs to be put in the area and to be part of that community in order for the shelter to survive in the area and to make it easier for the men in the shelter and as well as for the community at large. Now, I'm very pleased that from originally, as you know, in July, there was a recommendation for a 100-bed shelter, and that we were able to reduce that to 50, which is a lot more manageable. In my opinion, we should be building smaller shelters rather than bigger shelters. And I think that most of the community members that attended the meetings were in support of the recommendation, and they support the report that we have before you. But one thing I will not support, and when it comes forward, and if it comes forward at council, is that if we cannot negotiate a reasonable and fair market value rent for that site, I will not support it. Because I don't think that we are in a position to pay above market rent, and to be held hostage by a landlord knowing that the city is renting a warehouse to increase the rent is unreasonable. So unless we are able to negotiate a fair market value rent for the facility, when it comes to council, I will not support it. But the report that you have before us is reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much. I want to start by thanking staff. So Councillor Nunziata and I didn't get away out of town during the summer, but neither did staff. They were there at all of our meetings every Wednesday night. Our committee asked for a lot of information. We had very dedicated residents, as you hear from both wards. We had both police departments, both 11 and 12, participate. We had many, many other organizations send staff. But the residents wanted information. For us, we were all going through this for the first time, looking at a shelter. A lot of really good information. Hard time to get information because, yes, staff go on holidays in the summertime. That's what we ask you to do, because that's when we're not meant to be having meetings. So we did get a lot of information. It was good, but we were hearing a lot about services. This committee, I think, got a real good handle on what services are needed inside this building to help the men who will be living in this building. But what I also heard loud and strong was they wanted the community to come into this building as well. So in the report, you'll see some ideas of what they were thinking of. I know one of the big ones was a barber's shop. So as the men come into the shelter, they can have a good shave and a haircut if they want, and then residents could come and pay for the service. We talked about a community kitchen. We talked about some activities in there, training for skills, which the community could also come in with the people who are living in the shelter. That to me was heartwarming. It meant to me that the community was accepting this building, coming in and saying, as we'd hoped, how can we all work together to make this a better place? We heard from other members of CLCs, which I found very informative about how they'd gone through the process. And it screamed loud and clear to us, we do have to look at the process. We really do, and I'm happy to see your report here today, and I would really like to be involved in that. We heard, as you heard from Trevor, who's lived in a shelter for 4 months. That was also good for us. Visiting Fort York, That's where we got these ideas, as you heard from Gabby today. We need a quiet room. We need a computer space. That's where we learned that. I admit I hadn't been in a homeless shelter before. Maybe I should have visited, but that visit allowed our community group to see how it was. Some of those residents showed us around. It was great. We were able to ask questions. So now the design mode. You heard that we had an architect come and do a rough design. It was a great design, but it did have the 100 beds. So by reducing the number of beds, we can bring in more space. We heard that we want an area where doctors and people can come. We heard other programming space, but we also heard that the community space has to be flexible. It can't be designed just for one use. It's got to be able to use over time. Things may change. So I think the CLC did a really good job coming up with suggestions on what programs we want. ID. I would never have thought of an ID clinic. You know, I've had ID since I came to this country. I got my driver's license, I got a Visa card, I got a bank account, I got this, I got that. A lot of these homeless people don't have that anymore. It's either lost or they don't have it. So an ID clinic is brilliant. A lot of the things we learned as well was from having staff there telling us how other shelters do something. We also heard that no shelter is identical. The community is different. The people coming into the shelters may want different services depending where this shelter is. So as I say, I think the CLC put some great suggestions forward for programming. The pet-friendly part I couldn't find in the report, but I'm sure it's in there as well. And that's another thing Gabby said to us, because we felt that we had heard that people won't come in off the street because they have usually a dog. I'm not sure what else other people would have. Maybe it's a cat, I don't know. But we should look at these sort of things. So we shouldn't inhibit people from coming in off the street when they need shelter because they can't bring their animal with them. We also had a lot of community groups in our communities, in both Ward 11 and Ward 13, who have stepped forward and said, we're here to help. Just on Sunday, some of my faith groups have said, how can we get involved? We'd like to come up and help, whether we hold services or whether we promote the services we have. For me, it's down the street, maybe jump on the Runnymede bus and come down to these churches. So we have learned so much, as I say, and I think that now both communities, all communities are saying, the homeless shelter is coming in. How can we make it the best we can for the men living there? We don't want men living on mattresses. We want them to have a bed. We don't want rooms more than 4 beds because other outreach to other shelters of people who use the shelters had said they don't want to be warehoused. They don't want, like when I was in boarding school, you had many, many beds in a room, in a dormitory. They need their privacy. We talked about having secure place for them to put their things, their computer, if they have one, a phone, or just their worldly goods, must be able to be locked away. I think this report is good. I know a heck of a lot of work has gone into it, and I believe our CLC group will stay with us and we will move forward, not meeting weekly. We will move forward and we will help get this shelter open and bring the services into the community which we desperately heard were needed, including childcare. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Any other speakers on the item? Okay, we have one motion. I believe Councillor Mihevc has taken carriage of it from Councillor Nunziata. We'll put it on the screen. All those in favor? It's carried. The item is amended. All those in favor? It's carried. That was the last item. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned. Enjoy the rest of the day.